The desert sang like an old woman mourning in her sleep. Wind carried whispers no one wanted to hear, dry stories of loss, of things buried and never prayed over. Beau McCrae rode with his hat pulled low and one hand on the reins, the other resting on the worn butt of his sidearm. He didn't expect company out here, just the steady rhythm of hooves crunching over sun-cracked earth and the creak of a saddle that had outlived better men. He wasn't out to fix anything, just replace a post. Some cattle had knocked loose during the sandstorm last night. That's what he told himself anyway. But Beau had taken to riding further these days, further from the town, from his own front porch, from the shape of a boy's shadow that never quite left the doorway. The sun dipped toward late afternoon, softening the hard edge of the land. In the distance, buzzards circled, not unusual in these parts, but Beau's mare, Dusty, tossed her head, snorting at something ahead. He slowed her with a whisper, his body tensing without realizing why. That's when he heard it, thin as thread, almost, lost in the wind. A whimper, then a second. It wasn't animal. He dismounted, boots sinking into a patch of sand still warm from the day's heat. A patch of cacti loomed ahead, barrel cactus clustered like soldiers, standing guard. And there, between two of them, were shapes too small, too wrong. Two girls. They were slumped against the base of a cactus, wrists bound in rusted wire that glinted in the dying light. One had her head bowed, hair hanging in a matted curtain. The other raised her face at the sound of his steps. She was no older than 8, sunburned, dirt crusted to her cheeks. Her lips had split from dryness, but her eyes were wide, brown and scared clean through. "Don't hurt her," she whispered, voice rough from thirst. "Please." Beau's throat closed. "I ain't here to hurt nobody," he said gently, lowering himself. His hands didn't go for the wire first. They went to his canteen. The girl flinched as he offered it. Her sister stirred weakly but didn't speak. "It's water. You can drink it," he said, tilting the canteen until a drop touched her lips. She shuddered, then grabbed it with trembling hands. Beau worked fast after that, cut the wire with his knife, every motion careful, respectful. When he saw the blisters and dried blood on their small wrists, something twisted deep inside him, something old and aching. He wrapped the girls in his duster and lifted them, one under each arm, their bones too light for the weight of what they'd carried. As he mounted up, one of them whimpered, clutching his shirt. He held tighter. "Easy, darling. We're going home." Dusty turned westward, toward the town of Dry Creek, her pace steady despite the new burden. By the time they reached the edge of town, lamps were being lit in windows. Shadows stretched long across porches. Beau rode straight to the doctor's. Doc Harper, an older man with whiskey on his breath and a tired soul, met him on the porch. Beau didn't need to say a word. The girls said it all, faces half lost behind grime and fear. Doc whistled low. "Lord Almighty, where'd you find 'em?" "Out past the canyon bend, tied to a cactus. They'd have died by nightfall." Doc nodded slowly. "Bring 'em in." Beau laid them gently on the doctor's cot. Della, the quieter one, didn't open her eyes. Daisy, the one who'd spoken, clung to his arm until Doc assured her they'd just be washed and checked. Beau stayed in the hallway, leaning against the wall as voices murmured behind the door. Every minute felt like penance. Eunice Harper, Doc's sister, came down the stairs holding a towel, her face pinched tighter than usual. "You gonna tell the marshal?" she asked, arms crossed. "You think they was left on purpose?" Beau didn't answer right away. He studied the lantern flame dancing on the wall. "Somebody chained 'em," he said. "Didn't look like a mistake." "Well," Eunice sniffed, "they'll need a proper place. Boarding house might take 'em, if they bathe proper and stay quiet." Beau turned. "They're coming with me," Eunice blinked. "With you? Beau, you live out by the ridge, alone, no woman in the house. What'll people say?" Beau's gaze didn't waver. "They'll say what they always do, then forget by next week." He walked past her and opened the door. Doc was just finishing bandaging a skinned knee. The girls had been cleaned up a bit. Their cheeks were raw, eyes heavy. "They'll sleep for a while," Doc said. "No fever, thank the Lord." Bo looked at Daisy. "You all right coming with me?" She nodded without speaking. Della stirred, but didn't wake. Doc hesitated. "You sure about this, Bo? Ain't a small thing." Neither was leaving them out there. He lifted them once more, bundled now in blankets. Rode back home slow, careful not to jostle them. The moon had risen, pale and quiet, by the time his cabin came into view. It wasn't much, just one room and a loft he didn't use, dust on shelves. A fire burned low in the hearth. He laid them near it, one on either side, and tucked quilts, or round their thin frames. They didn't say thank you, didn't need to. He didn't expect it. He boiled water, left some by their sides, put cornbread and beans in a dish nearby in case they woke hungry. Then he sat in the rocker near the fire, watching its orange tongue flicker in silence. The wind rose outside. Coyotes howled in the distance. He didn't sleep, just watched the shadows move, the blankets rise and fall with the girl's slow breathing. He was a man who had buried more than he had built. But tonight there were two souls under his roof who might make him try again. He didn't know their story yet, but he'd heard enough to know one thing. Someone had left them in the desert to die, and he wasn't about to let the wind have the rest of them. The first night, they didn't take their shoes off. Bo noticed it when he bent to cover them better, with the quilt, the firelight flickering soft across their faces. Their shoes, scuffed, too small, dry-creased and stiff, stayed planted against the floorboards like they feared the ground would vanish if they let go. He didn't touch them, just adjusted the blanket and stepped back. He didn't sleep that night either. He sat by the fire until the logs broke into coals, until the wind outside began to lose its voice. The desert night was sharp, and even inside the cabin, the air cooled toward dawn. He added another log, careful not to wake them. Della mumbled once in her sleep, a dry whisper that might have been Mama. Then silence again. By morning, the girls hadn't moved. Bo fixed a pan of corn mush and scrambled eggs, nothing fancy. He set out 2 small tin plates in his own, but didn't wake them. Let the scent of food do the asking. Sure enough, Daisy blinked awake first. Her face tensed as she remembered, but she said nothing, just nudged her sister until Della stirred beside her. They sat at the table stiff-backed, like they didn't know if they were allowed. Daisy took a fork, but Della used her fingers. They didn't speak, not to him or each other. Just ate like they were timing each bite, racing against the possibility that the food would vanish if they slowed down. Bo poured them water, then his own coffee. "You two got names?" he asked, gently. Daisy nodded but didn't offer hers. Della wiped her mouth on her sleeve and said, "She's Daisy. I'm Della." He nodded. "Bo. Just Bo." Della stared at him for a long beat, then turned her face back to her plate. They spent the day like survivors, not children. Bo gave them space. He went outside, fixed the chicken wire on the back fence, chopped firewood, kept one eye on the window. The girls watched from inside, faces small behind the glass. When he brought in firewood, he found them, sitting on the floor near the wall, as far from the door as they could manage. "You don't gotta stay back there," he said, not unkindly. "Ain't nobody comin' to take you." Daisy looked up. "You don't know that." He crouched, set the wood down slow. "I don't. But I do know they'd have to come through me first." Della didn't speak, but her eyes flicked to his, hands, calloused, large, capable, then back to her lap. That afternoon he set out a washtub with warm water behind the cabin, turned his back while they took turns, washed their old clothes himself, laid them across the porch rail to dry in the sun, gave them one of his clean flannel shirts each to wear in the meantime, too big, but soft and warm. They didn't say thank you. He didn't ask for it. That night, they slept near the hearth again. Bo noticed the shoes. Still on. He said nothing, just sat in the rocker, sharpening his knife by firelight. The next few days passed in a rhythm neither fast nor slow. Della barely spoke at all. She followed Daisy everywhere, shadow-like, and only answered when spoken to directly. Daisy talked more, but only in questions. What time's breakfast? Can we feed the horse? Why does your roof crack at night? Bo never answered with more than he needed to, but he let them help feed the chickens, showed them how to pump the well without spilling, let them brush Dusty's mane, even though she hated children. The mare tolerated them, snorted once, then stood still. That was a miracle in itself. Daisy laughed. It was quick and surprised, as if she hadn't heard her own laugh in a long while. It startled Bo. He didn't laugh back, just tipped his hat and said, "She likes you." One morning, Della drew something in the dirt with a stick. Bo saw it from the porch. It was a woman, bent over, long hair, a child at her skirt. The face was just a circle, no features. He didn't ask who it was. He already knew. At the feed store that afternoon, Bo stepped inside for flour and nails. The girls waited on the porch, huddled on the bench. Townsfolk watched. Eunice Harper stood just inside, her lips pursed like a scolding waiting to happen. "You mean to raise 'em?" she asked. Bo placed a tin of coffee on the counter. "Mean to keep 'em safe." Not the same thing. They got a roof, a fire and food. And a man with no wife and no future. Folks will talk. Bo looked at her flat. They always do. Behind her, Maybeth Lorne sorted mail in silence. She glanced up once, met his eyes. There was no judgment in hers, just a quiet understanding. She didn't speak, just slid a wrapped parcel across the counter. A book, no address, just a note for the girls. When he got home, he placed it on the table. Daisy found it first. She didn't say a word, but opened the pages like treasure. That night, Bo saw her reading aloud to Della under the flicker of lamplight, their voices soft. They still wore their shoes. A week passed before Della started talking more. It came suddenly, while Bo was cleaning his rifle. "Why'd they leave us?" The question hung like dust in still air. Bo set the cloth down. "Don't know. Some folks just ain't built right inside," Daisy whispered. "Mama tried to fight him." Bo turned. "Him?" Della nodded, eyes distant. "The man who chained us. He hit her. Then he said she could scream if she wanted. Nobody was listening." Bo's hands curled around the wood of the table. "Where's your mama now?" Neither answered. Daisy said, "We walked till we couldn't any more." Bo stood slowly, reached for a blanket, draped it around both of them. "You ain't walking no more. You're home now." It was the first time he said it out loud. That night, as the fire settled into a red hush and the wind died down, he checked the girls before. Della had kicked off her shoes. Daisy still wore hers, but she'd loosened the laces. It was enough. Bo sat in the rocker long after they slept. Not to guard, not out of duty, just to be near. And somewhere in that hush, something shifted. Not in them, but in him. A man who had once buried a son now. Watched two souls stitch themselves quietly into the seams of his world. They were still healing, still quiet. But tonight they slept with their shoes on, because some part of them still remembered pain, and another part, just starting to bloom, remembered comfort. The wind shifted east, the day Bo saddled up again. The girls had been with him nearly 2 weeks. Long enough for Della to hum while brushing Dusty, long enough for Daisy to forget to lace her shoes tight before bed. Long enough that Bo found himself making 2 cups of coffee in the morning instead of 1, just in case. Maybeth stopped by again with her quiet eyes and warm-bred silences, but Bo hadn't ridden back out to where he found them. Not once, until now. He didn't explain it to the girls, just told them he needed to check a line of fence down by the canyon bend. Della handed him a small apple wrapped in cloth. "In case you get hungry," she said. Her voice was barely above a breeze. Bo didn't say much back, just touched her shoulder. light, like the way you'd close a book you weren't done reading. He rode out as the sun peeled back the edge of morning. The desert shimmered, its silence tight as a drum. Buzzards circled again above the canyon. Ridge, same as before. He tied Dusty to a low mesquite tree and walked the rest on foot. It didn't take long to find the place. The barrel cacti still stood, unmoved by time. But the ground told stories. Scattered footprints faded, wire twisted around a rock, and farther up, where the sand formed a shallow basin between the hills, something caught in the wind and tugged against a sage root. A piece of fabric. He moved. Closer. It was the hem of a calico dress, half buried, sand-stained and torn. He knelt, fingers brushing the dirt away gently, as if unwrapping a secret. The fabric was smeared with dried blood. Bo exhaled, slow, the kind of breath that carried memories you didn't live, but somehow still felt. He didn't need a grave. To know someone had tried to fight here, he saw it in the drag marks, the scuff of boots, the place where the earth dipped like a knee had struck hard. He stood, folding the torn dress carefully, not shaking it out, not wiping it clean, just holding it. Then he looked west, past the red ridgeline. You fought, he murmured to no one. They saw you fight. The ride back was slower. The wind picked up behind him, chasing dust devils across the flats. As he neared the cabin, he saw Daisy and Della sitting on the porch. Daisy shaded her eyes. Della ran to the gate when she spotted the cloth in his hand. That's hers, she said. No question, just truth. Bo dismounted and gave it to her. Daisy came beside her sister, gripping the edge of the cloth. They didn't cry. Children like them didn't often have the luxury. That night, Bo hung the torn dress on the inside of the cabin door. He didn't say why, but neither girl questioned it. They just stared at it a moment before crawling into their quilts. Later, Bo found Daisy's boots by the hearth, left there on their side, for the first time. The next day, Maybeth arrived with a pie wrapped in a faded linen towel. She didn't say much, just handed it to Bo, then noticed the dress on the door. Her face changed, softened but not with pity. You found her? She asked. No, just this. She stepped inside, looked around. The girls are in the back? Resting. She ran her hand along the table's edge. You've done more than most would. Bo poured her coffee and set it before her. I'm not trying to be a hero, he said quietly. Just don't like ghosts getting left behind. She looked at him long and level. That's not what they'll remember. He wasn't sure what she meant by they, the girls, the town, or the ghosts. Maybeth left before sunset. As she reached the porch, she paused. There's a service next Sunday for the children lost in the valley flood last year. Might be good for them to go. Might be good for you too. Bo nodded, unsure if he'd go. He'd stopped attending. Church after they buried his boy. The pews had felt too tight with judgment, too empty of answers. That night Della spoke up as Bo was dousing the lantern. She sang to us, she said suddenly. Bo turned, surprised. Your mama? Della nodded. When she thought we were sleeping, she used to hum something about a lonesome dove. Daisy whispered, I miss her hands. Bo didn't know what to say to that, so he pulled the girls' quilts tighter and left the lamp burning just a little longer. He stood by the window, staring into the desert beyond. The sky above was a dark sheet stitched with stars. Somewhere out there, a woman had fought and bled and been buried by wind. Somewhere, a man still breathed who had done it. And Bo knew now. He couldn't rest until he found out who. 2 days. Later, Ezra Baines came riding up with dust on his coat and the kind of look that meant trouble. Bo met him at the gate. Ezra dismounted slowly, adjusting his belt. You hear from anyone about them girls? He asked, jerking his chin toward the house. Bo stiffened. No. Why? Ezra took a folded letter from his saddlebag. Some man wrote from down south, says he's kin, wants to claim them, says they're his brother's kids. Beau's eyes darkened. What else did he say? Says he's got papers, says you're harbouring them. Letter don't sit right with me. Too clean, too prepared. But it's the law to follow it through. Beau's jaw tightened. Those girls were chained up and left to die. No man that'd allow that deserves a say. Ezra met his eyes. I don't disagree, but if he comes, and he's got a marshal, from El Paso at his back, we'll have a problem. Beau didn't answer, just looked back at the cabin, at the dress still hanging quiet on the door. Ezra placed a hand on his shoulder. You got little time, use it well. And with that, he rode off. Beau stood there long after the dust of Ezra's horse disappeared down the trail. Inside, the girls were laughing over something Daisy read from Maybeth's book. Their voices floated out the window like birds discovering their wings. He couldn't let that be taken from them. Not again. He stepped inside. The girls looked up, their joy flickering as they saw his face. What's wrong? Daisy asked. Beau shook his head, forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Nothing. Just thinking I might need to build y'all. A proper room. Della's eyes lit. With a window. Yeah, he said, with a window. But in his heart, he was already making plans that had nothing to do with hammers or nails. He was going to find out exactly who had left that woman to bleed in the sand, and he wasn't going to wait on anyone else to bring him justice. It was a Thursday when the stranger arrived. The town square was baking under a high noon sun, wind tossing dust across boardwalks and making church bells moan. Beau had just returned from the West Ridge, sweat streaking his collar and dust caking his boots. He saw the man before the man saw him, standing by the water trough, dressed too neat for someone claiming to be kin of girls left to die. Tall, slick black hair, mustache trimmed like a banker's. He wore a suit 2 sizes too fine for the desert and carried a rolled paper like a prize ticket, eyes cold as a poker table. Name was Clayton Morrow. He walked into the sheriff's office like he owned something. Ezra greeted him with guarded politeness, but Beau could see it in the marshal's jaw. The man rubbed wrong against his soul, too. Beau waited out front, leaning against a post. The girls were safe at the schoolhouse. Maybeth had taken them there for the day, a quiet offer Beau accepted without a word. When Clayton finally stepped outside, he looked Beau over like a problem he'd already solved. I reckon you're the one. Calling yourself their guardian. Beau didn't move. I don't call myself anything, I just didn't leave them to die. Clayton smiled, thin. You've made a sentimental mess out of this, Mr. McCrae, but it don't change blood. I'm their uncle, by law and by paper. Ezra stepped between them before it turned into something more. There'll be a hearing, the marshal said. Town square tomorrow? Clayton tipped his hat like he'd just closed a business deal. I'll see you there. Beau watched him walk away, and every step the man took raised a wind of old anger behind Beau's ribs. That night, the girls sat quiet through supper. Della picked at her biscuit. Daisy stared at the fire like it might answer something for her. He's here, ain't he? Daisy finally asked. The one who chained us? Beau looked up. He's saying he's your uncle. He's not, Della whispered. He said if Mama made more noise, he'd throw us in the pit with her. Beau reached across the table and covered her hand. He's not taking you. They didn't nod, but they didn't look away. The next morning, the town square filled before the sun crested high. Beau walked the girls in hand, their hair brushed, their dresses plain but clean. The church bell rang once. Eunice Harper stood with arms folded like a judgment carved in wood. Others clustered near the general store, pretending not to stare but leaning just enough. Ezra stood near the fountain, which hadn't worked in years. A flat platform had been set up in front of it, more show than structure. Clayton stood on it already, arms folded, papers in hand. He looked like a lawyer, though he wasn't one, just a man who knew how to twist truth into ropes. Beau stepped up beside him. The girls stood behind, their hands clasped. Ezra cleared his throat. "We're here to hear a claim of kinship. One Clayton Morrow says he's legal uncle to Della and Daisy, says they belong with him. Beau McCrae here says otherwise. This town's not the court, but until Mesquite sends a judge, we'll hold this hearing fair and seen." Clayton stepped. "Come forward. Ladies and gentlemen, this man," he pointed at Beau, "is keeping two girls who ain't his. No schooling, no church, no law behind it. I've got blood, and I've got these." He waved the papers like scripture. Beau said nothing. At first, just looked at the crowd, at Eunice, at Maybeth, standing on the edge with her hands clasped around her Bible. Then at the girls. They were chained to a cactus, Beau said, voice low, left with no water, no hope. Whoever tied them up wanted them dead. He turned to Clayton. "You say you're kin. Where were you?" Clayton laughed. "That's not relevant." "I've been searching." Della stepped forward. "You weren't looking." Gasps rippled. Clayton's smile froze. Della's voice trembled, but did not break. "You were there. Mama screamed. You said if we cried, we'd get worse. We didn't. Forget." Clayton turned pale under the sun. "She's just a child." Ezra stepped forward, tone steel. "Children don't lie about fear. Not like that." Eunice stirred. Others murmured. Townsfolk looked at one another, unsure now. The tension was a storm, thick in the heat. Daisy stepped up beside her sister. "Mama said we'd find someone kind. She said if she couldn't come back, we had to run. So we did." The square went quiet. Not even the wind dared speak. Beau stepped back, giving them space. His eyes were glassed, but he didn't blink. Maybeth stepped forward now, her voice quiet, sure. "I've seen them in the schoolhouse. They laugh again, they read, they sleep without screaming. If that's not proof of where they belong, I don't know what is." Clayton's voice rose, shrill and slick. "This is a witch trial, not a court. That man's a widower with no income, no structure. You let emotions run law, you'll ruin the whole system." Ezra raised a hand. "You want Mesquite to rule, fine. Till then, they stay with Beau." Clayton stepped down fast, spitting dust. "You'll regret this," he muttered. "This town's gonna choke on its own self-righteousness." No one stopped him. No one spoke for him. He rode out an hour later, leaving behind only a cloud of dust and a memory that would sour the wind for a while. As the crowd dispersed, folks avoided Beau's eyes. Some nodded. A few touched his shoulder in passing, but it was Maybeth who stood longest. "They did right," she said. "And so did you." Beau looked down at the girls, one on each side of him. They weren't smiling, but they were standing. "They did more than me," he said. "You made room for them to do it," she replied. That evening, the girls ran ahead to the cabin. Beau stood a moment on the porch with Maybeth. "I ain't got much," he said. "Barely enough to hold myself steady some days." "You don't need much," she said, eyes soft. "You just need to stay." Inside, Della had set the table. Daisy was placing the pie Maybeth had brought last week at the center, careful not to spill. Beau looked at the dress, still hanging on the wall. The wind had tugged one edge loose. He walked over, smoothed it flat again. He would leave it there. A reminder, not of pain, but of what pain tried to steal and failed. That night he slept deeper than he had in years, and in the corner beside the hearth sat two pairs of shoes, lined up, clean and empty. Because for the first time, the girls didn't need them close. They were staying. It began with a ribbon. Beau found it caught in the thorn bush outside the barn, sky blue, frayed on one end, the kind a mother might tie in her daughter's hair before church. He didn't know how long it had been there. Wind must have blown it in from the canyon rim, or maybe it had waited, like memory, buried and patient, until it was time to be found. He turned it over in his palm, then carried it inside. Daisy gasped when she saw it. That was Mama's. She put it in Della's hair before... Her voice trailed off, caught between sorrow and reverence. Della reached for it, silent as always, but her fingers lingered when Beau placed it in her hand. She held it like something holy. Beau didn't say much, but something shifted in his chest. A weight, not lifted, but named. That night, he sat at the edge of the girls' quilts and asked, not to pry, but to honor. "Tell me about her." Daisy smiled softly, the kind of smile made of ache. She liked violets, sang real quiet, like she didn't want to disturb the stars. Della added, "She had a scar on her arm, said it came from falling off a mule. But we think it was from—" "Papa," Bo didn't correct her. "Did she believe in heaven?" he asked. "She used to say heaven was just peace," Daisy said, "and peace was a porch with no fear on it." But sat with that for a long time. The next day he rode out alone again, this time not to find but to finish. The canyon where he'd found the girls looked different now, softer somehow, as if time had peeled the rage off the rocks and left only the shape of what mattered. He found the basin where the torn dress had been. The wind had swept most of it bare, but Bo brought stones. He laid them in a careful circle, each one placed like a word in a prayer. He dug the earth himself. Slow, deliberate, the way you dig when the dead deserve remembering. He left no cross, just the blue ribbon, tied to a cedar branch and planted upright beside the stones, a marker not of ownership, but of love. He didn't speak, just stood until the wind took his hat, and he let it. When he returned to town, the whispers had grown soft. Ezra met him outside the sheriff's office, a folded telegram in his hand. "Clayton's been arrested," he said simply. "Caught selling fake guardianship claims in Arizona territory. Faces 5 years minimum." Bo didn't smile, just nodded. Justice, when it came late, was a quiet thing. 2 weeks passed, then 3. The girls settled into school. Maybeth visited more often. She didn't bring flowers or grand ideas, just presents and warm bread, and the kind of silence that makes a place feel safe. The town held its spring gathering that month. A church, picnic, something to bring the people together after a bitter season. Bo didn't intend to go. He'd never been one for crowds. But when Daisy came into the barn wearing her mother's ribbon, tied new in her hair, and asked if he'd come see her sing with the other children, he said yes, without thinking. The square was dusted clean, tables stretched with cloths and pies, a nervous hope. Folks glanced at Bo, some with hesitation, but more now with respect. Not loud, not announced, but earned. Daisy sang shyly with the schoolchildren, standing one shoulder behind Della. Bo watched from the back, arms crossed, heart clenched. It wasn't her voice that undid him. It was the way she reached for her sister's hand halfway through the song, like a tether to something sacred. And then it happened. When the songs were done, Maybeth stood on the small platform and, to everyone's surprise, called Bo forward. He froze. She didn't ask, just gestured. He walked slow, every step louder than applause. Maybeth spoke gently. "This town's seen a great many things, but not often do we see a man do what no law asked of him. Take. In 2 broken girls, patch their spirits like quilts, and ask for nothing back." She turned to Bo. "You didn't rescue them with guns or grand speeches. You did it with warm bread, clean blankets, a place at the table." A hush fell. One by one, people began to stand. Ezra, Eunice, then Doc Harper, then others. The entire town stood. Della stepped forward from the crowd, her shoes clean, her dress pressed. In her hand a folded paper. She gave it to Bo. "We wrote this." He unfolded it, hands shaking slightly. "To the man who saved us without asking, who gave us peace when we thought there was none. We love you, and we are yours, if you'll have us." Signed, Daisy and Della. Bo's throat closed. He knelt to them. "You're mine already." The crowd didn't cheer. They wept, quietly, openly. Even Eunice, who'd never approved of much, dabbed her eyes with a lace handkerchief she pretended wasn't wet. That night, Bo carried the girls home. One in each arm, though. They were getting too big for that. Maybeth walked beside him, her hand brushing his once, then staying there. When they reached the porch, Bo paused. The wind had quieted. The stars blinked down like old friends. Della looked up. "Can we stay forever?" Bo looked at Maybeth, at the home that had been too quiet, at the two souls who had filled it. "Yes," he said, "forever and a day." Inside, the hearth glowed. The cabin smelled of cinnamon and old wood. Bo sat in his rocker as the girls fell asleep curled beneath quilts they'd helped sew. Maybeth leaned against the doorway, arms folded. "Never thought I'd see this," she said. "What's that?" "A man who gave so much," she said, "and somehow ended up with more." Bo didn't answer, just looked at the girls, their faces soft in sleep, their chests rising in rhythm with peace, and for the first time in years, he believed it. Peace wasn't far off or unreachable. It was a porch, with no fear on it. If you walk through Dry Creek now, folks won't tell you much about Bo McCrae. They'll point to the house with flowers blooming wild at the gate, where laughter spills like water. They might say he was quiet, odd, a little broken. But they'll say this too: what he did made the whole town cry, because in a land of dust and drought, sometimes the bravest thing a man can do is stay, and sometimes love doesn't arrive loud. It arrives barefoot, holding a ribbon.
The snow had fallen hard that morning, thick as wool batting over the rail tracks, muting the clamor of town into something hushed and waiting. Steam curled up from the waiting locomotive, rising like a silent prayer. Lila Bennett stood with her gloves pressed to her mouth, the edge of her calico dress wet from where it had brushed the slush. She wasn't crying. Not yet. Her breath hitched behind her ribs like a caught rabbit, but her eyes stayed hard, focused. The man in the distance leaned on a cane, thick as a wagon spoke, his frame swaddled in furs like he thought he was some backwoods king. Clayton Breck, 62. 3 times a widower, once accused of arson, and never proved guilty of the things folks whispered when they thought no one was listening. He looked like a bear that had chewed its way through winter and was still hungry. He'd paid for a bride, and she was supposed to be Lila. Behind her, near the edge of the platform, stood Annabelle, her 17-year-old sister. Petite, quiet, always watching more than speaking. Wrapped in a hand-me-down shawl, boots too big, eyes too wide. "I'll wait here," Annabelle had whispered just minutes earlier. "You go to him." But Lila hadn't moved. Clayton saw her, of course. He tipped his hat, smiled with those gray-stained teeth. A smile with no warmth in it. The kind that said, "I paid for you, girl." Something in Lila's body revolted. Her throat clamped. Her hands went clammy beneath her gloves. She felt the train platform rock beneath her, though it didn't. The sheriff had told her once, "This town's not made for unmarried women. You either marry, serve, or leave." But now she turned, slowly, step by step, and walked in the opposite direction. Past the town grocer who looked away. Past the stable boy who flinched when Clayton scowled. Past her sister who said nothing as Lila passed her by. She didn't hear the train whistle. Didn't hear her sister's footsteps. Didn't know the moment Annabelle stepped forward. Didn't know she was being replaced. 4 days earlier, in the attic of their father's boarding house, the air had smelled of cold lye soap and mold. The walls were thin. The wind got in. Lila had sat at the edge of the cot, braiding her own hair with angry fingers while Annabelle stood near the frost-lined window. "You think he'll let us starve?" Lila muttered. Annabelle didn't answer. She just watched snowflakes spiral beyond the pane like tiny white birds. "He's not a man," Lila said. "He's a debt collector with a pulse." "Then don't go," Annabelle replied, quiet. "I have to." "No." Lila looked at her. "We owe 6 months' rent. There's no jobs left. Not for girls like us. That man promised to take me, feed me, send a little back. It was the only way." Annabelle's voice broke. "But you're not meat." Lila stared at her sister, seeing her suddenly. The baby fat in her cheeks still hadn't gone. Her wrists were too thin. Her fingers fidgeted with the edge of her shawl, hiding the tremble. "You're too young to understand," Lila said gently. "This world doesn't care if we cry." Annabelle's reply was simple. "Then I'll learn not to cry." On the morning of the departure, Lila had awoken to silence. The attic was empty. Her shawl, boots, and letter to Clayton, still unsigned, were gone. Downstairs, her father snored in a drunken heap near the hearth, pipes still smoldering in the ashtray. She sprinted to the train station, boots unlaced. and she saw the back of the girl boarding. Lila's coat. Lila's hair pinned the same. Too far. By the time she screamed her sister's name, the sound was swallowed by steam. The train moaned, then thundered west into the snow. Lila stood frozen long after the tracks fell silent. A few townsfolk lingered, pretending not to have noticed. But the station master gave her a look, part pity, part disgust. "You shouldn't have let her go," he muttered. "A man like Breck, he doesn't forgive." She turned to him, fury rising. "You knew." He hesitated, then shrugged. "Sisters always trade places. It's just the smart ones don't get caught." Lila walked home, but her legs didn't carry her fast enough. When she arrived, her father was gone. The note he'd left was just 3 words. "She'll survive better." No signature. No apology. That night, snow slid off the roof in sheets. The wind howled like it had teeth. Lila sat by the hearth, nursing a blister on her heel and a tear in her heart. She imagined Clayton's ranch, cold, isolated, ringed with broken fence posts and bad history. She imagined her sister there. How Annabelle would try to be polite, would try to keep her head down, would try to endure. Lila had been born angry, but Annabelle had been born kind. That was the difference. That was the risk. 3 nights later, a letter arrived. No postmark. No signature. Just a folded page slipped beneath the boarding house door. Lila read it by the fire. The handwriting was hers, but not written by her. "He knows I'm not you. He doesn't care. I think he likes that I'm scared. Lila, I'm sorry. I should have let you go. But I couldn't watch you disappear into him. You've always been the one who fights. Fight for me now." Lila sat for hours, letter clenched in her hand, forehead pressed to the window where the frost painted ghost trees on the glass. Morning came, bitter and slow. The river had frozen solid. Cattle froze where they stood in the valley. She packed her bag, tied her boots, took the money she'd hidden in the chimney, and walked into the snow. The train to Claymore Ridge didn't run again for another week, so she hitched rides with fur traders, slept beneath wagons, ate jerky and swallowed pride. All the while, her fingers tightened around the only thing that mattered, the letter. She was going to get her sister back, even if it meant burning the ranch to the ground, even if it meant she'd be next, because in the Wild West they liked to say every woman had a price. Lila had just found hers. And this time she wasn't walking away. The sky above Claymore Ridge looked like it had been stitched from ash and bruises. Gray on gray, soft and unrelenting. Annabelle had never known silence like this, the kind where snow smothered sound before it could travel. Her boots cracked against the ice-crusted ground as she stepped down from the train alone, no one meeting her, no warm arms, no carriage. Just wind and the sharp bite of regret curling beneath her ribs. The conductor, a heavy man with crooked spectacles, offered her a sympathetic nod as he unloaded her trunk. "You sure this is the place?" he asked, gaze lingering like he already knew the answer. She nodded. Her voice had been lost somewhere between the boarding house and the station. "He's expecting me." That wasn't a lie. Clayton Breck expected a bride. Whether he expected her was something else. The town was barely more than a stretch of buildings hunched under snow. General store, livery, blacksmith. Beyond that, white nothing. Ranches tucked far between hills, where smoke rose thin from chimneys too distant to see. A boy from the station pointed her toward a waiting sleigh, the driver cloaked in fur, his beard iced over. "Breck's place," he said, handing her up without introduction. Annabelle sat stiff beside the driver, arms around herself, scarf drawn high. She watched the town disappear, then the road, then any trace of direction. The ranch didn't appear so much as emerge, like something thawed reluctantly by fire. The house stood lopsided, half the shingles torn off the roof. A wind vane spun on rusted iron. One of the corral fences lay broken, trampled under hooves long gone. The air smelled of iron, pine, and something less pleasant beneath. The driver didn't wait. He dropped her trunk on the porch and turned his team without a word. The front door opened before she knocked. He filled the frame like a shadow poured into shape. His beard was white and stained at the edges. His left hand gripped a cane carved with notches, and his right held a cigar he hadn't lit. Clayton Breck had the look of a man who expected silence and got it. Annabelle stepped forward. I know who you are." His voice cracked like dry timber. "Not the one I ordered, but close enough." Her throat closed, but she gave a little curtsy anyway. "I'll work hard, sir. I can cook. So clean. I didn't pay for a maid." He stepped aside. Inside, the warmth was faint and bitter, the fire more smoke than flame. The walls were stripped bare, no photographs, no paint. Just aging wallpaper peeling like old skin. Dust clung to the corners. A rifle hung above the hearth like a quiet threat. "Room's upstairs," he said. "I don't like noise after supper. I don't like locked doors. And I don't like being made a fool of." She nodded once. She could still taste the train soot in her mouth. Later that night, her fingers red from washing cracked pans and scrubbing a stove black with years of grease, she slipped into the room he'd given her. It was smaller than a stall, with a cot and one warped window facing the woods. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands shaking. Every part of her body wanted to scream. Not because he'd touched her, he hadn't, but because he didn't have to. His silence did worse things than fists ever could. There was no letter paper. No pen. So she carved words into her memory instead. "He knows I'm not Lila. He looks at me like I'm a ghost in borrowed skin. I think he wanted a bride he could break. But I already came broken." By the third day she learned to keep the fire going with damp logs. The ranch hand, an older man named Clem, showed her how to feed the chickens. They had 3. One had frostbite. The barn creaked like it remembered better days and resented the present ones. Clem spoke little but kind. He brought her gloves when hers tore. Gave her a flask of tea once. Never stared. She asked once, "Do you like it here?" He snorted. "I like surviving." Clayton watched her always. From the porch. From the shadows. He didn't follow her, but he made sure she knew when he noticed. She never let her back turn long. That night after supper, canned beans and dry bread, she snuck out. Just for air. The snow had stopped, but the cold lingered like a jealous wife. She walked toward the woods. Not far. Just past the barn to where the fence had collapsed. She needed Sky. She needed a place where his voice didn't live. That's when she saw the lantern bobbing near the trees. Not a flame. Electric. Strange. Out of place. Then came the voice. "You'll freeze in that dress." She turned, startled, one hand clutching her shawl tighter. He stepped out from the trees, tall, lean, dark coat dusted in snow. No beard. Maybe late 20s. Worn leather gloves. A scar slashed across his temple and vanished into his hairline. He wasn't beautiful, not in the usual way, but something about his stillness held power. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I thought I was alone." "You were. Until you weren't." She tried to step back. "I'm not him," he said gently. "I lived past the ridge. Saw the smoke. Thought you might be lost." "I'm not." "Doesn't mean you're not in danger." She stared at him. "Who are you?" He paused like the question had weight. Wes called her. She didn't recognize the name. But the way he looked at her, calm, alert, patient, made her trust it. He took off his coat and draped it over her shoulders without asking. "Cold eats slower if you're still," he murmured. "You walk too fast, your lungs freeze before your feet." She should have gone back. She should have said thank you and walked away. Instead, she whispered, "I'm not who I'm supposed to be." He didn't blink. "Neither am I." They stood in the snow, his lantern flickering between them like a heartbeat. And for 1 second, the storm felt quieter. He didn't ask what she meant. Didn't pry. Instead, he walked her back to the edge of the barn and watched until she went inside. That night, Clayton didn't say a word. But she felt something shift. A silence heavier than before. She dreamt of running. Of falling into snow so deep it swallowed her whole. The next morning he mentioned Wes. "Neighbor boy thinks he's some kind of savior. Always poking around where he don't belong." Annabelle didn't answer. "You'd be smart to keep close to home." Still she said nothing. That night she went out again. Just to the barn. Just to breathe. Wes was there. "I shouldn't be here," she said. "But you are." They sat on the edge of a broken trough, knees close, not touching. He handed her half a biscuit. She took it. No words this time. Just silence that felt safe. She told him everything. About Lila. About the switch. About her father's deal in Clayton's eyes and the way she felt like glass. He didn't interrupt. Just listened. Finally she asked, "Do you believe people can escape?" "Depends on how fast they bleed." She smiled despite everything. "That's a horrible answer. Better than a false one." A gust of wind blew snow in through the cracks. He stood and offered his hand. "Come tomorrow," he said, "if you want to remember what warm feels like." And then he was gone. She stayed there a little longer, holding the biscuit like it might melt if she let go. The next day, Clayton brought a letter from town. Her name was written wrong. Lila's handwriting. He held it up. "You're not her. I never said I was. You let me believe it. You let yourself." He stared at her like she just spit in his drink. I own this land. I own your life. You don't own me, she said, quiet. You rented me. And the lease is wearing thin. His slap wasn't hard. It was slow, deliberate, but it knocked the air from her chest. She didn't cry. She just stood there. Blood in her mouth. Fire in her chest. That night she ran. Not far. Just to the barn. But Clayton was waiting. Go to him, he snarled. Let's see how long he keeps you after I'm through. And before she could move, he shoved her. She hit the snow hard. Her head rang. She tried to stand. Legs wouldn't work. Then footsteps. Not Clayton's. Wes. He came through the snow like a shadow split loose. Lifted her gently. Didn't say a word. She wept then. Not because she was hurt, but because someone finally held her like she wasn't broken. He carried her back toward town, coat around her like armor. Behind them, Clayton's voice rang out. You want her? Then take the debt too. But Wes didn't stop walking. Not that night. Not ever again. Annabelle woke to the scent of pine resin and stove smoke, her cheek resting against a coarse wool blanket. Her body ached. Not from the fall, though her side throbbed, but from something deeper. A soreness in the soul. Her thoughts scattered like crows. It took a moment before the walls around her made sense. Wooden, warm, humble. A fire hissed in the corner, casting amber light across shelves lined with jars and weather-worn books. She sat up slowly. Her coat, Wes's coat, was folded at the foot of the bed. Her boots had been dried and set near the fire. The storm outside still raged, but in here there was quiet. The door creaked. Wes entered, carrying a steaming cup. His hair was damp from snow, eyes shadowed with lack of sleep. You're safe, he said simply, handing her the cup. She held it with both hands, staring into the rising steam like it might show her the future. Did he follow us? No, a pause. He knows where you are. But he won't come here. Not yet. Annabelle took a slow sip, grateful and burning. Why are you helping me? Wes sat across from her. No words came immediately. He was a man who used silence like a language. Because someone should have, he said at last. Back when I needed it, no one did. I figure the world owes me a few redemptions. She looked at him differently then, past the scar, past the quiet. He wasn't a hero. He was a survivor. The kind who learned to stop asking questions because the answers never saved anyone. She stayed 2 nights. Wes never asked her to leave. He never touched her. He made space. He offered food. He gave her warmth. But she couldn't stay hidden forever. I have to go back, she said on the 3rd morning, staring out his frost-framed window. Not for him. For me. Wes didn't try to talk her out of it. He just nodded. If you do, go with your eyes open. She swallowed hard. He thinks I'm nothing. That because I came in someone else's place, I don't get to matter. You matter to you, Wes said. Start there. The ranch looked smaller when she returned. The front gate sagged. The barn roof had half collapsed under the weight of snow. Even the shadows looked tired. Clayton was waiting on the porch, cane in hand, a bottle resting by his boot. Took you long enough, he muttered, eyeing her like a hawk sighting prey. You make a habit of running off with strange men? She said nothing. Just walked past him and into the house. Later, by the fire, he poured a drink. She refused hers. I know who you are now, he said. Both of you girls were fools, thinking names mattered. You wear the coat, you bear the burden. That's how this land works. She stared at the flames. Is that why all your wives left or died? His hand twitched on the glass, but he didn't hit her this time. You want to play at being tough, girl? Fine. But toughness don't feed a ranch. And it don't pay a debt. What do you want from me? She asked flatly. I want you quiet, useful, and loyal. That's worth the coin I paid. You didn't pay for me. I paid your father. Same thing. No, she said, voice low. I'm not my father's to sell. And you're not a king buying livestock. He laughed then, a cruel rusted sound. You think Wes is gonna save you? That ranch of his can't even keep a roof from caving. He plays night, but he's just another broke boy with too much pride. Her voice rose. At least he's not a monster. Clayton stood. Keep your mouth, girl, or I'll sew it shut. She didn't flinch. Try. You didn't? Not yet. But the threat hung like a noose in the rafters. Over the next week, Annabelle changed. She stopped asking. She started doing. She repaired a broken hinge with her own hands. She learned the patterns of the stove, the way the wind cut through the east wall, and where to shove quilts. She cleaned the rifle. Quietly. Not for him, for herself. A symbol of survival, not surrender. She found the letters he'd hidden, Lila's second one, unopened, torn at the edges. Her hands shook as she read it by lantern light. I'm coming. I'm not leaving you there alone. I don't care what he says or what our father wants. You are mine, and I will not let the world forget that. Annabelle wept. Not like a girl, but like a storm cracking a frozen river. And that night she wrote back. Not to Lila, but to herself. She folded it carefully and tucked it beneath the floorboards. Just in case. 3 days later, Wes rode in. He didn't come to talk. He came with fire in his eyes. Clayton met him at the gate. She came back, the old man sneered. That makes her mine. She's not a field to be plowed, Breck. She's a woman. And you don't own women. Then why's she still here? Clayton countered. Because she's stronger than both of us, Wes said. Annabelle stood in the doorway watching them. Wes's voice was steady. Let her leave. Peacefully. Or I won't be peaceful. Clayton smirked. Big talk from a man with holes in his roof. I'm not here to impress you. Breck leaned on his cane. You'll regret crossing me. Already do. Should have done it years ago. Annabelle stepped forward then. Between them. She held her head high. I'll leave, she said. But not like a thief. Like someone reclaiming her name. Clayton laughed. You think you'll be free just because he stands there? She turned to him. No. I'll be free because I've decided to be. He reached for his belt, too slow. Wes's gun was drawn in a blink, steady and aimed. Try it. Clayton's hand froze. Annabelle didn't run. She walked. Past the man who thought he bought her. Past the ghosts in the walls. Past the ranch that never wanted a woman with a voice. She mounted Wes's horse without help. And for the first time since the train ride she smiled. Not because it was over. But because she knew it wasn't. Not yet. Snow fell again the night they returned. Heavy, quiet, relentless. The kind that blanketed sins and softened memories until everything looked cleaner than it was. Annabelle rode beside Wes, her fingers curled in his saddle's worn leather. She hadn't asked where they were going. She just trusted the direction, forward. Away from a name that wasn't hers. Away from a debt she never owed. Wes hadn't spoken since they left the Breck ranch. But his presence, steady and wordless, offered more safety than any wall. When they finally stopped, it was at a cabin tucked between two ridges, roof sagging under snow but smoke curling from the chimney like a heartbeat. It didn't look like salvation. It looked real. Inside there was no grandeur. Just a battered stove, a small table, 2 chairs. A rifle hung on the wall, and a threadbare quilt rested across a single bed. She sat at the edge, boots still on, not yet ready to soften. Wes poured water into a kettle, his motions practiced, calm. You can stay here as long as you want, he said without looking at her. Annabelle studied him, his strong back, the scar that vanished into his hairline. Is this where you came when you left his ranch? He nodded. This or the woods. I don't sleep easy under someone else's roof. She let the silence stretch. It had weight. And then, softly, what did he do to you? Wes leaned against the counter, jaw tight. He didn't beat me. Didn't need to. Just made it clear I was nothing. Worked me like a mule. Took credit for anything that went right. Blamed me when things went wrong. The day I walked off he said I'd be dead in a month. Snow took my horse that night. I walked 2 days. Thought he'd be right. But he wasn't, she whispered. No. And I decided if I lived past that I'd never owe another man my life. He paused. Then I met you. She turned her face to the fire. You don't owe me anything either. I know. That's why I stayed. The kettle hissed. The room filled with the scent of pine needles steeping. He handed her a cup and sat across from her. You're not what I expected, she said. I get that a lot. Quiet. Rough around the edges. But you listen. Listening's the only thing that ever kept me breathing. Annabelle stared into her cup. Clayton's not done. He let me go too easily. I know. You think he'll come? Wes didn't answer at first. Then, he won't ride out here himself. But he'll send someone. Word spreads. You humiliate a man like him, he doesn't forget. Her throat tightened. I don't want anyone else to get hurt because of me. Wes looked at her then, really looked. That's the difference between you and him. He breaks things to feel strong. You carry what's broken because you think it's your fault. A long pause. I'm tired, she whispered. Of being afraid. Of wearing a name that doesn't belong to me. Of flinching every time a man raises his voice. You don't have to explain that here. I know. That's why I'm still here. Outside, wind scraped against the cabin like claws on bark. But inside, for the first time in weeks, she felt something new rising: resolve. The next day, Wes handed her the rifle, taught her to aim, to breathe, to pull the trigger only when it mattered. Her fingers were stiff from cold, but her eyes never wavered. Each shot cracked across the clearing like a vow. At night, they shared stew in silence. She told him about Lila, how she always had more courage but never the right words, how their father bet their future on whiskey and lost, how Annabelle had spent her whole life cleaning up other people's choices, and how this time she wasn't going to run from the mess. She was going to end it. 3 days later, the reckoning arrived. She saw the rider before West did. A stranger, broad-shouldered, wearing Breck's coat. Not the man himself, but close enough to carry his threat. Annabelle stood at the window. Her breath fogged the glass. He's not alone. 3 more followed. Guns at their hips. Faces like stone. West didn't ask if she was ready. He just loaded the rifle. They stood on the porch, side by side. Snow still falling, the world turned to white. The lead rider stopped 10 yards out. Got a message from Mr. Breck. West didn't blink. Say it from there. He says the girl's his. Says you stole property. Says if she comes now, he'll let you walk. Annabelle stepped forward. I'm not property. The rider grinned. He says he's got proof. What proof? Wes asked. A ledger. From her daddy. Marked and signed. Annabelle felt something in her ribs twist. Her father's name had become a weapon. Wes raised the rifle. Tell him this. You show up again, you won't leave with both legs. The rider shifted. Hands twitched near holsters. Annabelle stepped down from the porch. 1 foot, then the other. She walked to the edge of the path, eyes steady. You tell him I burned that ledger. That I'm not for sale. That the girl he tried to break now carries a gun and knows how to aim. She pulled her coat back just enough to show the butt of her pistol. Tell him, she repeated, this story doesn't end with me crawling back. The lead rider hesitated. Looked at the others. Then he tipped his hat. You're braver than your daddy ever was. They turned. Left without a shot fired. The snow swallowed the hoofprints behind them. Annabelle stood there long after the riders disappeared. Until the cold pierced her bones and Wes stepped beside her. You didn't flinch, he said. I'm done flinching. They went inside. Sat at the table. Broke bread. The storm kept howling. But something inside her had gone still. Not empty. Steady. She had faced him, his threat, his shadow, and stood her ground. She had chosen her own name. And for once, it fit. The thaw came slowly, as if winter itself was reluctant to let go of the ridge. Trees dripped in the mornings, icicles wept by noon, and the snow no longer crunched beneath boots but sighed. In the quiet of that in-between season, Annabelle began again, not as someone's sister, not as someone's bride, not as someone's debt. Just as herself. She chopped wood beside Wes, her sleeves rolled to her elbows, palms blistered and healing. Each swing of the axe was a punctuation mark on the story she was rewriting, one without Breck's name in it. She'd learned to fish the stream when it cracked open, to mend torn gloves, to aim with certainty and speak with more. Wes didn't hover. He didn't question. He simply made space, and in that space she found breath. He built her a shelf by the window for the books she'd gathered. He carved her a comb. Small gestures. Quiet offerings. One evening, she sat cross-legged by the fire, reading aloud from a tattered poetry collection she'd found in the old cabin trunk. Wes listened with his eyes closed, head resting against the doorframe, boots crossed at the ankle. When she finished the last line, he opened his eyes. You read like someone who once needed saving, he said. She met his gaze. Maybe I still do. Wes shook his head gently. No. You just remember what it feels like. The fire popped between them. She felt it then, that strange pull. Not of romance like novels claimed, not lightning or thunder, but something steadier. Like warmth after frostbite. Like home. In the morning a letter arrived. Not by post but by hand. Left on the porch bench, bound with twine. The handwriting stopped her breath. Lila. Annabelle opened it slowly, fingers trembling. The ink had bled a little at the edges, but the words held. I heard what you did. They talk in whispers, but the words reach even the corners I've hidden in. I don't know how to say thank you. I should have been the one. But you became the girl I wanted to be. The one I never was brave enough to become. I'm safe now. Somewhere he'll never find me. Somewhere I can learn who I am without being sold. I hope you found someone who sees you for more than what you sacrificed. Annabelle folded the letter to her chest, tears silent and slow. Then she placed it in the drawer beside the bed and lit a candle in the window. Not as a signal. As a promise. The next weeks passed in quiet routine. A small garden planted. A rocking chair fixed. Birds returned to the trees. The world didn't erupt in gratitude for her survival. It simply went on. But in the rhythm of it, she learned something radical. She didn't need permission to belong. One afternoon, as storm clouds gathered behind the hills, Wes came to her with a question in his eyes. "Ride with me." She didn't ask where. She simply saddled up. They rode out past the creek, beyond the treeline, to where the land dipped into a hollow ringed with wildflowers pushing stubbornly through snowmelt. He dismounted and led her to a wooden frame half buried in thawing soil. A house. Not built yet. Just bones. "I've been working on it," Wes said. Slowly. "I figured I'd finish it someday. Alone." She stood beside him, eyes wide. "It's beautiful. It's not much. It's enough." He looked at her then, serious and still. "I don't have gold or land to offer. I'm not anyone's idea of a good match." Annabelle stepped forward. "I didn't come here looking for gold." "I'm not asking," he said, voice quiet. "Not yet. I just wanted you to see it. In case you thought about staying longer." "I already stayed longer." Wes smiled, and for the first time it touched his eyes. They stood in the frame of a house not yet built, beneath a sky the color of pewter. The wind kicked up, stirring the scent of soil and thaw and cedar bark. She rested her hand on one of the beams. "I think this place already knows us," she said. Wes took her hand. And this time she didn't pull away. That night the storm rolled in heavy. Lightning flickered beyond the hills. They sat side by side inside the cabin, the wind battering the shutters, firelight warming their knees. And then a knock came. 3 sharp raps. They stood at once, Wes with his rifle in hand, Annabelle just behind him. The door creaked open. Clump. Clayton Breck's old ranch hand, soaked through and shaking. "They're coming," he rasped. 6 men. "Breck sent them. Says he'll burn this place if he has to." Annabelle's stomach clenched. Not fear. Fury. Clem stepped inside, coughing. "He's drunk. Madder than I ever seen. He won't stop." Wes turned to her. "I'm not running," she said. Neither did he. They boarded the windows, readied the rifles, and waited. The night stretched long. But the men never came. Morning broke pink and gold. In town they later heard Breck's men turned on him. Said he'd lost what little mind he had. No one took orders from a man who talked to ghosts and drank with loaded guns. He was found face down in his barn, bottles smashed beside him, mumbling about 2 girls with the same face and fire in their eyes. No charges were filed. No justice handed down. But the world has a way of closing its own doors. Annabelle didn't celebrate. She lit a candle for him too. Not out of grief, but release. Some stories end not with vengeance, but with silence. And in that silence, something new begins. Months passed. The cabin expanded. A new porch. A second room. Lila sent another letter, this time with seeds: wild rose, blue flax, yarrow. Annabelle planted them all. The land bloomed with color. And in the middle of it, she stood in a linen dress she'd sewn herself, hair braided down her back, eyes clear. Wes came up behind her, placed his hands gently on her shoulders. "You ready?" "I've been ready," she said. They didn't need a preacher or a ring. Just the earth and the sky and the quiet vow in their eyes. As the sun dipped low, turning the snow-tipped peaks to gold, Annabelle turned to face the cabin, the one they built together, board by board, breath by breath. Not because someone saved her. Because she became the kind of woman who knew how to save herself. Some girls are born into stories written by others. And some write their own. She was the girl who came in her sister's place. And became the one no one would ever forget.